Welcome to our video series, Hiding Behind the Mask, Conversations on Shame and Narcissism, combining psychological and spiritual perspectives. This is a 12-part series moderated by Dr. Kristen Seavey and featuring the insight of Reverend Robert Hirschfield, Episcopal Bishop of New Hampshire, and Dr. Patricia Gianotti, clinical psychologist and author. Each video segment will begin with a brief introduction by Dr. Seavey, where she will describe an overview of the content material. At the end of each section, a set of questions will appear on your screen. These questions are meant for personal reflection, or you may use the questions as a springboard for small group discussion. We hope you enjoy this series. And now, Dr. Seavey.
The next segment aims to describe how one heals from narcissistic injuries. Bishop Rob discusses how spiritual practices can lead to the healing of psychic wounds, while recognizing that psychological training may be necessary for deeper trauma.
So we've started to touch some on processes of healing, what that looks like. And I'd love to ask both of you what the relationship between psychological healing and spiritual healing is, and whether there's a distinction there and what similarities they may share and ways that they may slightly diverge.
Great question.
Great question. You go first.
I have sometimes, even before I was a bishop, in my colleague relationships, would sometimes have to address within myself and in colleagues their own narcissism, thinking that they could somehow fix somebody or address an issue that really required a sustained, regular, steadfast relationship that was therapeutic. And so, you've heard these guidelines among clergy that we see somebody 3, at the most 6 for 6 sessions. Even then, that's a lot. But we don't try to assume that we have the technical knowledge, and we are limited in terms of how far we can go in these stories, and the pain that they that accrue to them. So there's always this kind of the best practices in the church are you make sure you refer to somebody. You have a Rolodex that ages me. Nobody has a Rolodex, but you have a file of trusted, discreet, trustworthy therapists that you can refer people to. And that just helps with those boundaries so that the attachments that inevitably take place are handled appropriately with competence, that all the business of transference and projection and all that stuff that you could speak to, maybe, that there's some safeguards around that. Having said that, I also feel like we have this rich narrative in Scripture, in theology, in liturgy, that there's something healing that takes place when we share, when we splash water and say that this is a cleansing event in baptism, that we're welcoming people at the table. I was in a household where if you were punished, you were told you couldn't have dinner. You go to your room, you're missing dinner tonight. And so it's essentially a familiar, I'm not the only one probably here, it was a kind of excommunication. And we don't do that by and large, I hope, in the Episcopal Church. So this idea of welcoming the spiritual, cyclic healing that can take place in the full, robust expression of our sacramental life has a healing place. I write about the service of Maundy Thursday and the washing of feet. It's an incredibly powerful event, which is all about shame and our release from shame. It's really an exodus from shame. And it's not a one-walk dog. You got to do it again and again and again.
Yeah.
And that's why we have ritual. So that's my answer.
You're speaking to the individual helping the narcissistic individual when you're talking about referring to psychology. And I think that maybe what we can talk about a little bit later is how the church can play a role in helping our society heal from the narcissistic damage that's happened through, people in leadership positions who never should have been there and that sort of thing, which is separate from healing the narcissist. Patricia, I think you were going to say something there.
Well, I guess part of how I would answer Nate's question is, I think at one point in time, therapy and religion, that the religious leaders did therapy before psychotherapy was invented. And if you think about the meaning of the word psychotherapy, it means soul healing.
Yes.
It doesn't mean personality healing. It means soul healing. And we're talking about working with people's vulnerability on a very, very deep level. And I know there's a dividing line in our field about not practicing beyond your area of expertise, but I also feel that metatheoretically and ethically things are shifting, where we're coming back to visit ways that we can integrate spiritual aspects into psychological practice a little bit more. Again, not practicing beyond our expertise, and as Bishop Rob said, boundaries are really important, and they're important for us as well. So when I do my own clinical practice, I really feel that I'm working on a spiritual as well as a psychological level. And I think that that's important. I also think it's important that you meet people where they are, and there are a lot of people that come into practice who have different disciplines, who are Buddhist or atheist or what have you, and that's fine too. But there's a resonance that I hold, and I know, Chris, you do the same thing, and other practitioners who are here with us in the audience feel similarly, that you're holding more than a person's history and their psychology. You're holding something that is so precious that I think the word soul approximates it so much better. The other thing I want to say about that to everyone is that I think it's time that the church or any of the spiritual disciplines in the field of psychology begin having deeper dialogue and interaction with each other, because one of the things that psychological practice doesn't have that the church has is an opportunity to be in community that's like no other.
Right.
And to create a community that's a safe place is so needed right now. I mean, the institutions that we have held dear are kind of fracturing a little bit. And the psychotherapy, the limits of psychotherapy are that we do our work behind closed doors, generally one-on-one or with couples. And there's such a need to be out in the world in a different way right now. There is an urgency, I think, right now that there didn't used to be before. And so I think part of why I wanted to come together with you and have this conversation and with all of you is to find ways that we can begin to think about how we would answer Nate's question differently,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And I don't have the answer yet, but the question opens up a thinking process and a dialogue, and the dialogue is what is going to have a ripple effect.
I agree.
Yeah.
The following questions are meant to stimulate personal reflection or small group discussion. We encourage you to capture a screenshot of these questions and use them for future reference. To order Dr. Gianotti's books, please contact the following websites. And Reverend Hirschfield's book is available through churchpublishing.org.